I'm Joshua Crocker.
And I'm Kevin Liston.
And this is Kicking for a Living,
a podcast about martial arts and business from two martial arts instructors.
It's good to be back after we had to take a short hiatus in the middle of our season because we had an event going on. Then we both got COVID at different times.
And then we had another incident that came up. It was just kind of a rough couple weeks.
Yeah.
All in all, but it's good to be back, kind of back in the swing of things. So
no, the week we were going to record this episode, I got sick, and then when you're sick, your voice sounds worse. So we had to be back here talking for 45 minutes, and then it'll be a nightmare in editing out all my coughs. So.
Well, and then I immediately got sick.
Yeah.
Essentially, everyone got sick. Luckily, it was at different intervals, and so we could kind of made the joke, okay, I guess it's my turn to take off for a few days to get better.
That did work out that we only ever had maybe two people out at once the whole time.
Right. It's just one of those funny little things that happens. One of those funny stories. See, segue. So
I want to talk about stories this week. Stories about martial arts. And I mean this in a few different ways. This was inspired by something we're doing at our school this month, where we're encouraging students to write stories and submit entries for our story contest or draw pictures of their experience with martial arts or just martial arts in general, to help them think creatively but also engaged with their training and martial arts both on and off the mats.
Yeah, and I don't think a lot of people realize how much creativity there is in martial art. I mean, it's called a martial art. There is an art point to it. But even just outside of that, there's a lot of creativity that goes into how a student learns, how you might teach a class, or just those little funny things that happen on or off the mat, or things you can do with students that kind of, I guess, get their brain and their creative juices flowing. Because at some point, every martial artist says, you've got to take your martial art and make it yours. That's essentially being creative. That's telling someone, hey, how do you get creative with this? So I think this is a great topic. I'm really excited for what you're doing at our dojo to kind of get those creative juices flowing as well.
So a few of the things I want to talk about today are some of the projects we've worked on that have taken creativity in the past, the stories we've told, some of our experiences. We've shared stories with events we've gone to, our experience with testing before. We're going to maybe share a few more just kind of the funny stories and the interesting stories we have from over the years. And then talk about how, like you bring up, it takes creativity on the mats to come up with new drills or to continue your own learning. And then if we have time, maybe even talk a bit about media representation of martial arts and the way, Hollywood tells stories about martial arts with popular shows like Cobra Kai, which came from the Karate Kid, and look into that a little bit.
Right, because I think there is definitely, I don't think it's a surprise, but the way it's presented versus the way it's actually done are very different. But, watching those shows and those kind of creative media outlets definitely drives people towards martial arts and piques up some interest in that, in different things. So I think it'll be a good topic. I think it'll be a lot of fun too. And I'm really excited for what's going on. I'm really excited to see I want to see what the students bring us first off.
Yeah, I'm excited for that. I've already seen a few people say they were going to go work on that. I know there's quite a few kids who like to draw. We see them while they're waiting for their class, sitting around drawing pictures. So I know a lot are interested in just kind of the art part of that, the drawing, the painting, etc. We actually have a event this month as well. By the time this comes out, it'll already have happened, but a crafting event where we're going to have some people up here, doing different crafts, and I have some martial arts related ones to work on that weekend, so that'll be cool.
Yeah, well, I mean, it already started because a while back you did a color your belt with our little, what we call our little ninjas. It's our 4, 5, and 6-year-olds. They came in and got to kind of we have all these spare belts in the background. What are we going to do with them? So
there were some pretty cool ones. We had a family who was working on their belt together, and theirs turned out pretty cool. They each kind of did their own part of the belt, so it was a mashup of all their work. There was one little ninja kid who he colored the whole thing by hand in the hour, and it looks pretty cool. He had kind of a hand-drawn tie-dye look going. But just, I was just going to say, to show some of the creativity of even the little kids, how they can engage with their martial arts in ways like that.
And I think it just helps people feel more connected.
Yeah.
We've talked about that in other episodes as well, that's one of the main reasons people do it.
Yeah.
Is that community and that connection. So get those creative juices flowing. I have a lot of stories, but I know you've put a lot more time into being creative with your martial art. You've got how many books about martial arts at this point?
Just one book that's about martial arts. I'm working on some other projects and books that are martial arts related. I've done our yearbooks for 3 years, though. So if you count those, those took a lot of time and were all at least 100 pages long with lots of pictures. So 3 of those, the book I wrote. Mm-hmm. So I'll talk about some of this for a little bit. And it goes back to the first kind of projects I did for the school. The very first one would have been my junior black belt project. I made a board game for when I was going for my junior black belt. Each time we ask the students, who usually are between age 13, 14, 15, going for their black belt, to make a project. And we've had a lot of different posters made, different kind of physical projects. We've even had a video project made before. But what I did for mine was a board game. I took a game I really liked and made custom cards for some of the instructors here, some of the different classes, and that was my project.
Yeah, because I remember that you were looking for photos of the students, because you even had cards that featured some of the students with their own, I guess, stats or abilities on each card for the game and things like that as part of that junior black belt project. And it was really creative, and I think that because it was so creative, we kept that idea going because it was so neat what you came up with. And every junior black belt has had to do their own project. Of course, you set the bar pretty high with that.
And until this year, and even arguably this is still kind of a hanging thing, mine was the only one that was like a physical item and not something that you can just hang on the wall. We had one kid who, like I said, was a video project, so you can't really hang that on the wall. But it was a pretty unique first project as well from what I've seen from everyone else. Like, no one else has really copied after me in that regard.
I don't think so. A lot of them are very, posters are very common, which is fine. If you want to create your own poster, I have no problems with that. But I think that became something that was very common. But when you see outside of that, when you see someone do something outside the box of that, that really shows that creativity and expresses that journey, which I really like. I think that was cool.
And there's 2 things I really like to see in the junior black belt projects. One, effort and the skill put into, or in some cases, students have to learn new skills for their projects. I know a few have mentioned that, but that their projects look good and the nature of that. But the other part of it is how personal it is to them. There was one project we got a couple years ago. I remember the student coming up and all like the Easter eggs they left in the project for their own interest and things they like about martial arts and outside of martial arts. They just were kind of sprinkling in these Easter eggs as they made it.
I guess I didn't even hear about that. It probably dawned on me which project was it. So you don't have to say the name, but which?
I'll say the name. I don't think I'll mind. One of our black belts, Brian, when he was going for his junior black belt, he made a board showing all our katas and the cycle we practiced them. And if you go back and look, so he's very musically talented, so he put in different music influences in there. His favorite kata is an Ishinryu karate kata Chinto. So if you'll see on that one, he added an exclamation point for that kata's name. So just some little small things he was pointing out to me he did for his project.
See, that's neat because those are things I didn't even pick up on. Well, I like those little hidden Easter eggs, that extra creativity that it shows. So that's really neat. I wasn't even aware of all that.
Yeah, so I look for every one of the things leading up to Black Belt Week, which we've talked about a lot at this point, but is getting to see the junior black belt projects be finished and get to look at those. I take it back. I said I'm the only one who's done like a physical item, but one of our kids this year did a picture book and kind of interviewed someone in his family for his project. So
yeah, I think we talked about that.
I wasn't even thinking about that, but but as we've seen some of the kids do posters and stuff to hang up around the dojo, the first project I did, I wasn't even on staff yet, but you guys paid me for these posters I was going to design, and we still have the posters hanging up in the dojo now, at least for a few more months. I'm working on an updated version of them, but that was the first project I did. So as I see some of the students design their posters for their projects, they look very similar to some of the first posters I designed here, and then a few months later I was hired after that. But kind of if you've been in our school before, we have our class motto hanging up on the main mat. We have a sign that takes our school name, integrity, and adds kind of a topic to, we call them our mat chats, but a different life skill for each of those. So I worked on those posters, and then I've worked on various other design stuff here. But last year I had the idea to write a book, and I've written a couple poem books, song books relating to just my own personal life, but I decided to write one about martial arts, and I called it Songs About Self-Defense. And the book has different poems, stories, songs about self-defense, but martial arts, my experiences with martial arts, just fun stories in general, advice, and just some other skills I could translate through stories. And I wanted this to be something that the students I work with could read and benefit from. They could enjoy reading, but they could also learn something and take value from as well.
Well, and I think that that's so cool. We have these books up on display. We've sold some to the students. It's so neat, and obviously they want to support. And you're so creative when it comes to these things. And I want to emphasize, and maybe this is going to embarrass Joshua a little bit, but this super creative book that the front cover is like a stick figure guy with a not even well-drawn wave master. But
So-
it fits the theme so well.
So I loved this cover when I made it, and I still do like it. I look at it now, I'm like, why didn't I put a little bit more effort into this? Because when I made it, I'm like, I did it pretty quick, and I'm like, oh, it's perfect already. And I just kind of kept using it, and I still think it's great.
No, I mean,
It is great. That's it.
It definitely, it's one of those kind of creativity and simplicity kind of things. When we get, those pictures that kids will bring us that are like, oh, I drew a picture of, you and Mr. Joshua fighting or whatever. I think I mentioned this the other day. And it's, here's this stick figure of Joshua, and then there's this tiny stick figure next to him. They're like, oh, that's Mr. Bamper, who, for those of you who don't know, is 6'4". He's way bigger than Joshua. But obviously, when a kid is drawing this, those things are hard for them to represent, and so it's really neat to see them trying their best at this really creative picture of something that obviously a kid drew it, but it conveys a lot of emotion.
Yeah.
I guess is the way to put it. And I feel like your cover does that.
And while I'm really good at graphic design, illustration's one of the few areas I'm not very talented at. So I'm excited to see what some of our students who do like to draw a lot will bring forth in some of their illustrations as we do this story contest this month. But when I wrote this book, it was always kind of my intention. I wanted to eventually do something like this at our school for our students. And I want to see things like this. And, everyone will add their own creative influence in it. But there's plenty of stories in here of, the little moments from growing up since I was 6 doing martial arts. And I have a whole chapter or a whole song here that's just these one-line comments that to most people just seem pretty generic. But I had these whole memories and stories of growing up and how martial arts, influenced me, how it was important to me, and just the fun moments I had along the way. It's small things like one of my favorite TV shows growing up was Phineas and Ferb. Still watch all the time. I was sick a couple weeks ago. It's always the show I watch when I'm sick. So I was rewatching some episodes. But there was a point growing up where we didn't really, we no longer had cable or anything. So to watch the show, we had to go to the dojo, and it was the series finale. So I remember being on the mats at our old dojo, watching the last episode of this show. That was, in its own right, very influential for me. And then it was, the small moment I was at another place, the dojo, that was influential to me. And just those little things that I still remember that still stick with me through all these years.
And it's amazing how people relate those things. Seeing what is influential. I know I've mentioned Dan before, but he grew up on Power Rangers. And, how that influenced him so much in his martial arts, not in the way it's done. He doesn't come out here and do a big, martial arts, Power Ranger pose before it. Well, sometimes he does.
Yeah.
But just that idea that was what influenced him. And, we all dressed up in Power Ranger t-shirts when we saw the newest movie because he really wanted to. But, had that not been a part of his life, would martial arts be where it is today for him? Probably not, even though that may not be how he does it, it still influenced him in that manner.
And I hope that's an influence, that the students I work with and that you work with can have through our teaching and through our classes. There's still, just from the years we've been open, we've done events outside of the walls of the dojo. And I still, whenever I drive past these places or I'm at these places, remember, what we did there as an event. One summer we went out to a nearby skate park and we, worked out at the skate park, every Saturday morning of that summer. And I still, whenever I drive past that, that's what I think of. And I have pretty good memories from that. That was fun. I would love to do something like that again sometime.
I remember, that was also the same park we did the bow staff seminar.
Yeah, we did a bow staff seminar. We did a belt ceremony. Two of our black belts got their black belts at that park, Actually, the park I got my first degree black belt from, I now live across the street from. I didn't grow up near the park, but now I live just around the block, so I regularly take walks out and see exactly where I was when I got my black belt, just when I'm in my own neighborhood.
God, that's really neat. That's really cool to see. It's got those memories that you build, the amphitheater there for like seating and stuff like that, and having to get a microphone and speaker out because obviously you're outside. You need something. Some of our voices can boom and echo, but not everyone's can. So those memories and how we had to get creative on where we were doing our belt ceremonies and making that work. Now to think that the school we have now is bigger than most of the venues we had to book out for ceremonies in the past. Our school's bigger than. But that was a long time coming.
No, but a lot of those stories, and I'm someone who likes to reflect on the past and be nostalgic, all that. But it's a lot of fun to put those things that influenced you and made you who you are and brought you along this path and remember those. So to anyone who's listening, take a second. Whether you're just starting your martial arts journey, it's going to be a little harder because you're still making those memories. But to people who have made a ways, reflect on some of that and see the things that brought you to where you are. Sometimes it's hard to have perspective in the moment, but if you think back to all the reasons you fell in love with what you do now or that brought you to this point, that's what encourages me. Whenever we do have a difficult drill we have to do here, a challenging day, a big exercise, those are the things that, at least subconsciously, are running through my mind that keep me going. And it's been like that for a couple years now. Every testing, those are the things I remember that try to push me to compete and do my best in the moment.
It's interesting because as we're having this conversation and we're talking about being nostalgic and those things that influence you, it reminded me of something that I hadn't thought about. You may not even know this, But when I was 19, I always wanted to do it as a kid, but it was 19 years old when I was really started doing martial arts. And I didn't have a school. Me and a friend, we'd go out, we'd do training, we'd go to Century, the same Century I shop at now, and we'd buy books. And a lot of those books they're in our back room, they're all those Bruce Lee books I had.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, all those books. I loved Bruce Lee. I loved all his movies. That was a big influence for me. And I started studying up on Jeet Kune Do. That was what Bruce Lee created, Way of the Intercepting Fist. And I remember me and the guy named Paul that we were training with, driving around and talking about, what if we had our own school and how we would teach and owning our own school. And of course, this was like a pipe dream to a 20-year-old at the time. Hey, having my own school. Well, lo and behold, over the course of time, my life changed. I started getting a career working in retail, but then I found another school, started training at, getting on the leadership team, and eventually became an assistant and started instructing. Well, here I am. And now I'm like, I have a school. That thing that I thought about when I was 19, 20 years old that I never thought would really happen, now I have it. And while my martial arts journey has changed, again, lo and behold, going back to Century, a guy named Paul Webb, two Pauls, was a certified Jeet Kune Do instructor. So I got to refine that initial passion that got me into martial arts and start doing Jeet Kune Do classes again. And just that story of how that kind of evolved, even though my martial arts skills and training did not at all play out the way I thought they would at 19. In the roundabout way, everything I talked about that I wanted to do, I have gotten to do after that point. But it's that initial passion, that initial thing that kicks you off, kind of coming full circle and seeing that creativity. And it almost blows my mind to think that that's how it happened, because I did not plan on that happening. That's just kind of how it happened. It's one of those funny little way the world works there. But I have to remind myself that's where I came from, Jeet Kune Do and wanting a school as, a teenager. And that's where I came from. And I've gotten to be able to do that. And so it's really neat. And I hope that kind of creativity and, those passions that you have, don't give up on them. You never know what's going to happen. And keep working. And
it's important to remember those stories, because it can be so easy to just be thinking about what you want to accomplish next. You forget that, you've already, in some cases, made it very far. I first wanted to write a book when I was 12, but probably before that, honestly. I've been doing this a while. And, now I do. I've been talking about this book I wrote for martial arts and some of the other ones I wrote. I did that. You own a school. And then I have, goals maybe related to martial arts as well, that in years I might look back and see a similar path taken.
Right. It's easy to get caught up in that belt mentality of, the goal's the next belt, which is great, but that's a stepping stone. Goals and dreams and aspirations can be so much bigger, so much more personal, and so much more creative than just, I want to get this next belt, this next accomplishment, or this next medal. That's great. Those are awesome stepping stones for that.
Here's a story from On the Mats, and this is a story I've seen several times, because it's whenever we're doing one of those mat chats at the beginning of class, and we're talking about goals. Every time I do this mat chat, I try to push the students to set some goals that have to do with, their skill or something they want to accomplish outside of just earning their next belt. But of course, being kids, mostly they just say, I want to get my green belt, I want to get my purple belt, I want to get this next belt. And, I understand that, and that's great for them. But whenever I do hear someone say, I want to get better at sparring specifically, I want to get better at being in close, I want to get better at my ground defense. And it's more common from the advanced ranks, which I do appreciate some of that. They've matured and start to see those things. Because it takes out of just, the next accomplishment, and more the growth inside and, the personal growth you can make.
Yeah, on that, there was, when I was out sick, my assistant was teaching class, and he asked them, hey, what is there something you all want to work on? This was a jiu-jitsu class, and this was teenagers primarily. And the first thing I would have thought of is they would have been, I want to work on this submission or like an arm bar or choke or something cool or something fancy. And they all settled on, I need to learn how to escape from the bottom. And I thought that was cool because, like you said, it's very specific. It's something that's real. It's something that they recognize that this is something I actually need to get better at. It no longer, they're taking that dream and realizing, this is how I get my next belt. You know, the next belt's great, but this is how I get there. This is how I make this dream happen or that dream happen or whatever it is. And so I think that those kind of things are really neat to see. And I think that's kind of the power of martial arts and the way that we as instructors get to do that. It's not just teaching classes. We gotta switch it up because we have a lot of people and they all learn very different. So we have to get creative with those things too, which kind of goes into, I wanted to talk about a little bit about how do we get creative with our drills on the mat. You know, there are only so many ways you can teach someone to throw a jab across and a snap kick. So how do we vary that up? How do you get creative with that?
That's sometimes a tricky question to ask, but that is something I'm regularly trying to do. Thursdays, I find, are one of the days where kids are the most lethargic. It's the last day of the week for our curriculum before we move on to the next topic. So I've often been a proponent to the other instructors, like on Thursdays, don't be afraid to mix it up a little bit and add some creativity into whatever is going on in class. And I think this goes for any class, really, but make being on the mats fun, because that's ultimately our number one goal. You could argue the number one goal is to teach them to stay safe, teach them the moves, but if they don't have fun, they're going to quit. They're not going to want to keep learning. So being on the mats has to be engaging. It has to be fun. And that's part of coming up with these creative drills. One thing I like to do is see what's kind of going on at the moment, whether we have an event coming up, a campaign going on, it's a special day. For example, Leap Day this year, we did a bunch of jumping exercises, jump kicks, jumping around for our warm-up. Everything was about jumping because it was Leap Day.
And I think that that's important to realize that when someone is having fun, when they are engaging their creative brain, they will retain the information better.
And this goes for everyone, because on that Leap Day, one of the best pictures we've gotten all year was from a class all jumping at the same time, doing kind of a freeze frame. Mm-hmm. And it was from the adult class, from the teens and adults. And they were just as much engaged and just having just as much fun as the kids did with this concept. And I've toyed around with some other ideas, or told some of the adult students of ideas I want to try out sometime. And they're always so excited for kind of these cool, fun, different things.
How to take a simple drill and switch it up, make it more creative, or how to theme it, around Leap Day or things of that nature. It gets that creative juice flowing. It gets the brain engaged, and if we can get their brain engaged and having fun, they'll retain the information better. They'll want to come back. And the best way to get someone to learn martial arts is consistency. Well, if they get bored, they're not very consistent with it. And trying to switch that up. And it's not always easy to do. You have a list of drills that you can go through, but you got to get creative, come up with new drills. Sometimes the students do that for us.
I'll give you one idea I had a few months ago that I haven't got to try out yet. And I think you'll appreciate this, as I know you've done lots of, role-playing games over the years, things like Dungeons and Dragons in that vein. But I want to do
Tell everyone how nerdy I am. Appreciate it.
Oh, we both are. We did at the dojo recently a role-playing night. But I want to do a class that's themed after Dungeons and Dragons skill set. So, like, building our dexterity with moves, strength, charisma. We could, work on drills where, you have to use your voice and your, talk someone down in a self-defense scenario. So for one of our adult classes, I want to take all the core attributes of a D&D character and look at how we can and do a drill based on each of those.
I mean, as silly as that might sound, it's completely accurate.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is. Even when you're sparring, you have to be wise and think about your strategy. You know, you've got to. Everyone's going to have it different. Some people are naturally stronger. Some people are naturally faster, and so it seems silly, but it totally works.
The moment, I had idea, I was like, this has no right to work as well as it does. Right. I mentioned it to one of our students, and she was all on board, like, oh yeah, I can't wait till you do that in class. So at some point I will do it. I just want to make sure I've got it thought out completely first and have a good day to do it.
This reminds me of one of those funny stories, because talking about, like, you know, Dungeons and Dragons, medieval fantasy adventures, there was, and this went on for years, there was this joke that the answer to any question was always the blue potion. Yeah,
I remember this. I don't know if I added it to my book, but that was the kind of thing I probably thought about adding.
I don't even know where it came from. Someone gave this weird answer to a question of, well, I just drink the blue potion, and then it stuck, and so the answer became the blue potion. Well, you know, how would you break this board? Well, the blue potion. How would you get over this hurdle or this obstacle, or how are you going to, the blue potion? But because all the students thought it was funny and became engaged, we could always kind of reference that to re-engage the class, and they'd all laugh, and then we could go through the drill. And so I don't even remember. I knew who was involved, but I don't know how it became.
I'm not sure if it's like a reference to some like video game or something that I don't know about. But yeah, I remember the blue potion years.
the blue potion. And when you have those things where you have those little quirk, I get called out all the time on having horrible jokes that I never give up on. I always repeat the same joke. But I always tell people, I say, okay, the minute people stop laughing, if I have at least one or two people even chuckle, I'll stop. But I always have somebody, at the very least, crack a smile. And so I'm like, I just got to keep doing this joke again. I got to keep it going. I have dedication.
And you can tell who's heard the jokes before, because whenever we're in a meeting and you make one of these jokes, me, my mom, Dan, just completely neutral faces. Don't crack a smile at all. But then some of the newer black belts, some of our newer instructors, you know, they smile or they let out a little laugh, even if it's out of pity, which I'm sure it is.
Most of the time, it probably. I can hear the eyes literally rolling, yeah. But I've got to do it.
I've come to just kind of expect it, like it's just a natural response. Oh, someone made a comment about that thing. Well, I know exactly what Kevin's about to say.
Yep.
You know?
Here comes the dad level joke. It's a really bad joke. Here it comes. But if one person always laughs, so I gotta commit. I gotta commit to the bit.
So yeah, I mean, one of the first things I did when writing my book was just incorporate some honestly corny jokes, and I like to consider it clever writing. I think I'm a very clever writer, but let's be honest, that's not always the case. But no, like there's a few just kind of jokes in there, but the tone of my book was it hit different things, because I wanted it to be a little bit aimed again at slightly younger audiences than what I typically write. But I wanted there to be jokes, fun stories, but as well as kind of has some serious messages. So as the book goes on, like I start to talk more about some of the things when it comes to self-defense that maybe isn't the thing we're going to bring up in a Little Ninjas or Basics class to these new kids, but becomes more clear as you go on. And the idea of self-defense, it ended up being very much kind of a personal thing when I was writing it, of, you know, what does self-defense mean beyond just being able to punch and kick to stay safe? There's a lot more to be able to go through life and to, you know, defend against some of the bad things and to just keep standing up. And I think that's one of the things, as I look back to these memories I made and these stories I made on the mats, they helped me to just keep standing back up again. Even when it was hard, even when I didn't want to stand back up after a tough hit, or I didn't want to go back to the school after a rough week, you know, you just wanted to stay at home. Those are the things that kept pushing you, just keep standing up. And that was ended up being one of the core themes and messages I wanted to get out of it, was that there's more to self-defense than just being really good at kicks and looking really cool. There's there's that other element of it that comes into play too.
And I think that a lot of that is kind of one of those, again, harking back to another episode, a misconception. Because we kind of talked about like media and all these things. You watch Cobra Kai and you see all these fancy fights. That is not, most people would know this, that is not how that works. It's not how that goes. Self-defense is really avoiding it. How can you get out of that situation? Or I know there's a big verbal self-defense, verbal judo, verbal jiu-jitsu, there's all kinds of names for it, verbal karate. But using your words to get out of this situation. Of course, it would be far less entertaining for a show based on Karate Kid if they didn't get in a fight in the middle of an arcade place with zero repercussions somehow, magically. But that makes for an entertaining show. Maybe not the most realistic. But having that kind of, again, creativity in the writing of this book you've done to show, this is really what self-defense means to me. It's more than just, I can kick really hard. Great. How often are you actually going to have to kick someone really hard? Hopefully never. But
and I like seeing those two sides of it. The side that, as someone who martial arts was very important and influential growing up, how that was something that helped me learn these lessons and connect these dots of, keep going and learn some of these just life skills that, you could argue have really nothing to do with martial arts. One of my favorite songs I wrote in my book, almost everything I wrote was martial arts related, but one song had nothing to do with it. It just fit kind of that theme of, standing up for yourself, keep going. And it had nothing to do with martial arts. It had to do with a conversation with a friend over lunch a few months prior. But I could still see how it connected to these other lessons I've learned. And now the other side of the coin, is, like you bring up, the fun entertainment, the fancy fights. We had a competition recently, and just hearing some of the people who watched the fights talk about how exciting it was to watch us fight, to watch the other students fight. It's the flashy part of it. And one of the books that I'm working on for, hopefully next year, we'll see when it comes out, is a novel about, it takes some of the story elements we use and putting in some of the mystical elements of that from years of being on the mats have kind of became our own, I call it the Integra lore. See, I can do bad puns too. But things like you brought up,
right,
the blue potion, or how we have one of the Bob punching bags, body opponent bag, very standard. But he's almost the mascot at times at the dojo because of all the stories we've made up about him and, his past, and things like that, these little story elements. And I'm excited to see how it turns out because it is going to be a bit more of the epic, flashy side of martial arts. But of course, I still hope to have some important messages in there.
Well, and we might just have to do a whole episode on the journey up the mountain, as it were, kind of starting out. But, it's all about developing a story, and it's all about developing creativity. And to be honest, while we have the idea of the story, we're still working on how to implement it and all those different things. But because you kind of brought up Bob and these stories on the mat, I use that all the time. I got a funny little story that I have started developing that's worked really, really well. Is when you have this big wave master, a kicking bag, and we'll get it out, and if students are kicking the bag or punching, and we're working on power and technique and, accuracy of those things, there are some times when I can tell a student they've got the idea, they've got it, they're just not really giving it that oomph. If they could just, let their body do what it's supposed to do and do what it's been trained to do and just put some power in there, we could be knocking this bag over, hitting it really hard. And I apologize if anyone out there listening is named Steve. It was not intentional, but I always tell them, there's this guy named Steve, and Steve was talking trash to you, or Steve kicked your dog, and he is in this bag. It's the silliest thing in the world. But you see the student, and it were all levels, kids to adults, and you'll see them just kind of light up, and then they just go bam, they just hit that bag, take that, Steve.
Guess no one likes Steve.
I don't know why. That was just the first name that popped in there. I have no personal grudge against any Steve. I just throw out random names: Steve, Bob, Rick, Greg, George, Tom. I've used them all, but just adding not just, okay, this is, hit this bag like it's something you don't like, versus, all right, here's this person, their name is whatever, Kevin, I'll use my own name, and they were talking trash. They were telling you, you're too wimpy to do martial arts. Are you going to let them do that? They're inside this bag. But creating a story around it drives that student to get the result that you want. Then once they kind of get over that, then you can be like, oh, great, now let's use this technique to make it stronger so we can beat up on Kevin in that bag a little more. We tied him up. I poked some holes in there so he can still breathe. So, we're good. Otherwise, it'll start to smell.
Ask that any school owners, martial arts instructors out there to make Kevin your Steve with your students.
Yeah, you can use my name. I'm not even going to register and trademark it or anything like that. That Kevin guy from that other martial arts school was talking trash on you. I captured him, put him in the bag, hit it harder. Yeah, please do. You don't throw me under the bus.
Yeah, we have, and I've been working on looking at some future projects, and I'm in charge of a lot when it comes to some of the brand stuff and some of that story. But putting together a collection of all the stories we've told over the years, the small things that, are just a fun part of our dojo and our community. But we've done some big projects as well. I wrote my book. We've had a podcast now that is on its second season. I did a video documentary last year, and I'm in the process of finishing my second one now. Future plans to do more video projects. So we've done a lot of big projects like that over the years.
Well, and even because I'm looking at it right recently. Now, our T-shirts. Each of our T-shirts tells a story, and I know we've created our own shirts, but we've also in the past let the students vote on some of their favorite shirts. Mm-hmm. I think that's how we came up with the it'd be hard to convey this over podcast, but the over there shirt.
So there's another joke we had in the early years of everyone would always point to something and they would flex their muscles really dramatically as they do. So we did a T-shirt where 2 stick figures. See, stick figures are a classic.
Works great.
And one is asking, where do you do martial arts? And the other one is saying, over there. And it's this really buff stick figure pointing.
Showing off all his muscles. But the kids voted on that shirt. I think that was one they voted for as the shirt they wanted. But because it was something on the mat that was a story that got the creativity going, they wanted to see a shirt of it.
I mean, the shirt you're wearing right now was one that kind of goes back to what I said earlier, just some of the places around town that kind of have some importance to our school and its history. We put that all on the shirt one year, to show those different parts of our community that reflect back onto us. And
the shirt you're wearing is video game level up shirt directly tied to when we got a newer, larger facility. The whole we leveled up. We've gotten to the next level. So we made this kind of level video game themed shirt. So again, that creativity flows into more than just punching, kicking, grappling, throwing, headbutting, or whatever.
So yeah, my lasting thing to say would just be to anyone listening to not be afraid to be creative both on and off the mats. And we did touch a bit on some of the on the mat creativity, but find some ways to spice things up, to add some of your own personality and skill sets into your training. It's something that I think this year has been a big theme on the mats for us with our students. So I've already kind of said a lot of that before. But to anyone else listening, keep that in mind. And, off the mats, maybe find a way to show your martial arts through whatever hobbies you have. I'm a writer, so I do it through writing, but I've seen all sorts of different ways people show their love of martial arts through their own hobbies, and it's really cool to see.
Right, and think of, again, how can you take one thing and just show your own creativity with it? We don't all have to be serious, 100% of the time and things like that. Yeah, take it serious, but do it in creative and fun ways. Get yourself engaged. If you're smiling and having a good time, like we said before, you're gonna retain it better. And so I want to see any creativity. If any students are listening out there, I would love to hear about some of your creative things and the creative things you've done, even if they're not martial art related. Let me know, one of our students, how big of a fish you caught when you were on vacation. They really love fishing and they like making their own lures and stuff like that. So I love hearing about that. Just getting those creative juices flowing. We have a lot of students that are in band. We had one student that went to a science Olympiad for, I think it was engineering for his project, for national champion. That was a big deal for him. Great. We love hearing about those things. Get creative.
For now, if you have any comments or questions for us, feel free to reach out, leave a comment. We'll get back to that. We have a few episodes left in this season, so we have a couple more topics we're excited to bring up and reach out to you guys about. Make sure to share this episode with anyone who you think would benefit from it or like listening to us ramble on.
But until next time, keep kicking
for a living.